welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm your host, Pete Mezzetti. My guest this evening is Jim Tripp, who's running for first selectman in the town of Portland. Jim, welcome. How are you, my friend?
Nice to meet you, Pete.
You too, buddy. You too. Long time. This is the first time we've ever met, but we've actually spoken, so it's actually nice to finally meet you in person.
Yes, likewise.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming down. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit of background on you.
Sure. I'm Jim Tripp. I live in Portland. I'm married to my wife Liz. We've raised 2 children there. Love our town. We've been very fortunate. Town has been very good to us. Fantastic education systems. Just a lot of things to love about our town. A lot of good progress has been made. My background is I've got a 30-year career in the private sector. I spent 5 years at General Dynamics, the last 25 years working in telecom.
Okay.
Education, I've got a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from UMass Dartmouth and a Master's of Science in Management from Rensselaer Polytech.
Oh, wow.
So I've been very fortunate in Portland to be able to get involved in the community over 20 years ago, working with some volunteer groups like the Brownstone Quorum. We've been working for over 20 years building the Riverfront Park. We're involved in cleaning up the quarries early in that process and promoting those. Okay. Recently been involved with work with the Portland Lions. Served as president of the Lions for a couple of years as we were starting a new community-based organization there. And on the public side, I also feel very fortunate. I've got to spend some time. I've served on our Parks and Rec Commission. I've served on Board of Education, and for the last 4 years I've served as a member of our Board of Selectmen.
Really? You like it?
I really like the work on the Board of Selectmen. Yeah. There are certain challenges that you could see working in the community that you could see coming down the pike.
Yep.
That kind of energized me to want to run for the Board of Selectmen and take on some of those roles. Yeah. Some of those issues are actually why I'm running for first selectman now.
Okay, well then that opens up the question. Why'd you decide to run?
I decided to run. I mean, first of all, we've been fortunate for the last 18 years. We've been led by first select woman, Susan Bransfield.
Absolutely.
She's done tremendous leader. The town has come a long way in that time. And we've made a lot of progress on a lot of issues. Right. We've got over that time, blue ribbon schools, 2 blue ribbon schools in our community, et cetera. But there are some issues that we see on the horizon that we need to address. Right. One of them is what we're going to do with addressing the rising water costs. Okay. This is something that I saw some of the communications and attended some of the meetings prior to running for the Board of Selectmen. And since I've been on the Board of Selectmen, I've been very involved chairing the Water and Sewer Subcommittee to continue working on those issues. Okay. Education is something near and dear to my heart. Again, my kids received fantastic educations in the Portland public school system. But when we look at where we're at as a district, we now have a situation where we've got our elementary facilities. We have 3 different elementary facilities. They're getting older. We need to look at what we're going to do to generate, basically to kind of regenerate those facilities and get them to where we'd want to be for our students to have that 21st century learning. And from economic development, how are we going to stay strong as a community? How are we going to grow our tax base? How are we going to do things that can make our community overall healthier? We have some things that we've been working on in terms of promoting with our businesses, et cetera. We've had good results from that, but we have some big projects that are coming down and some things that I've been working on for a lot of years, such as the redevelopment of our riverfront Brownfield parcel. So all of those together really, when Susan decided to retire, I just looked at my experience, I looked at the challenges that we're going to be facing, and decided that it was something I wanted to do.
Now tell us a little bit about the riverfront Brownfield project.
Sure. There's 3 parcels on Brownstone Avenue in Portland. There were 3 parcels. It was basically an old tank farm. Okay. That was there, and there's a couple of empty lots. But basically, it was used with petroleum products, and it has some impacts, basically some contamination associated with that. Sure. But right across from the street from that, on the other side of Brownstone Avenue, we have our historic brownstone quarries. Right. Right now, the brownstone quarries have been operating for 16 years now as a recreational facility that has been tremendous benefit to the town.
Absolutely.
Right? Just north of these 3 parcels is the Portland Riverfront Park. Right. And that's been a focus of my group for really since 2007. Okay. When you look at that area, if we could clean up that blighted property, that could put us really in a good position to do some additional development and to enhance some of the uses that are bringing in good revenue to our town and creating a lot of good jobs. Right. So what's happened is in 2012, I think we started initially looking at this from looking at the initial phase 1 evaluations of the property. And ultimately in 2019, we ended up buying the properties. So we had to go through that whole process. We were fortunate. We got a $750,000 grant from DECD. We were able to use that. We bought the property because the Brownfield's funding is available primarily to municipalities. So we bought the properties. We own them, and now we're using that grant to clean them up. We have the RFP for that. Is basic. Actually, I think the RFP may have just come back for us to look at that, and is being evaluated now for how that for how we're going to proceed. The goal is to try to have the remediation at least mostly complete, if not complete, in 2022.
Wow.
So at that, so then we need to move forward from there.
Yeah.
Next piece is that we have to really focus on is doing a market study to see what's going to be the best use, what's going to continue to help us enhance the existing uses down there. That's important that we look at those uses and what's consistent, in my opinion, because we've had, for example, with the brownstone quarries, that generates about $400,000 a year in revenue for the town, which means we're reducing folks' taxes by about $500,000 by having those operate.
Absolutely.
If we can enhance that, if we can bring other uses, other economic development down that's consistent with how we're using other parts of the property, that just provides some good synergies for us.
Now, let's talk about economic development in the town of Portland. How are things going economically for the town?
We're actually doing well in a lot of respects. For example, if you take a look at Main Street, one of the challenges that you always want to look at is how many empty buildings do you have?
Absolutely.
Right. Now, we, several years ago, started working on rebuilding things like our sidewalks and such, right? And we have now a much more walkable community than we had several years ago. Okay. We also have a large parcel in the Elmcrest property, which is now is Brainerd Place and is being redeveloped. Okay. That's going to be two residential buildings that will house up to 238 units, right? 238 apartments, 30% of which will be 2-bedroom. The rest will be a studio or a 1-bedroom. So we know we're going to have some folks moving into the downtown with that facility. But another good component of that is over 100,000 square feet of commercial space. Okay. What's nice as we're looking at that is we're starting to see with some of the positive things that are happening in town from those fronts. We have a lot of other businesses that have been investing in the downtown. Okay. We have Concentric Brewing that has come in. Portland Ale House is coming in. Owens Emporium is coming in. Bordinero's. We had a wonderful pharmacy business with Joe Bordinero's family. When they retired and that shut down, that building's now being used for Owens Emporium, which is going to be a new facility that's coming in and doing consignment shop. Oh, cool. We have other buildings that are being rehabbed. We have a local dentist is moving practices in. So there's a lot of things that we're starting to see and a lot of development that's happening with the downtown to the point where on that Main Street component, we really don't have any vacancies. I think right now we might have 1 vacancy. Oh, wow. And then as you go out Route 66, there's a couple of properties that we still need to find uses for, but as I understand it, the property owners have some things that they're working on and some very specific goals that they've set for themselves. Okay. So as a community from economic development, we're doing well. We have some good things that are happening down at the riverfront. We also, our businesses are doing well in town. Also nice to see coming out of the pandemic with all the challenges. Yeah. We have a community that really supported at our local restaurants and such. Absolutely. So we're lucky that we still have all of our local restaurants. That local, the local businesses that have been there for years are still there. Absolutely. So. Now let's talk, as far as with the town side of things, let's talk about the education aspect of things and how things are looking on the education side. Sure. Again, we're fortunate. We have a very good school system, but I'll say across the board, the biggest thing we're facing, like a lot of other communities, is we've seen some declines in population. Yep. Right, and that's always a challenge as you're trying to manage it. We do participate in open choice, so that helps provide more diversity within our community, but it also helps. It helps with the numbers, help make sure that we keep more folks in our school system, so that we kind of work together that way. The biggest challenge that I think right now is the fact that we have those aging facilities. Right. Our secondary complex is basically 2004, so I think 17, 18 years old now. It's holding up pretty well. Our elementary school facilities, some of those facilities now you're going back, some of them are 70-year-old facilities. We've got 3 of them. How are we going to manage those going forward? Right. What we actually created a couple months ago was a 9-member committee, 5 members of which are from community at large, 2 members from the Board of Selectmen, 2 members from the Board of Education. Right. The goal with that committee is to actually analyze some different options, take a look at things that are available, and really kind of do a study as to what the right solution and provide some recommendations. Those recommendations are due back in June of next year. Okay. And as for a selectman, one of my goals would be to work and partner with our Board of Education and work with this committee, look at those recommendations and come up with what the correct solution is for Portland. I think the other, probably the other item from an education or facilities standpoint, sure, it's worth addressing is, you know, we have an aging track facility. Okay. And there's been a lot of talk and a lot of conversation about, you know, how are we going to replace the track and how are we going to work on that. And this is a place, again, where you look for those partnerships, right? A lot of the things we've accomplished, even when we talk about Riverfront, a lot of things we accomplish in town is establishing and working with, you know, partnerships, whether it's the state. We actually were able to get into bond legislation, some funding, a request for some assistance, and we're hoping that that gets bonded and that will help out the town. But if not, this is an item that we've got to look at how we're going to move forward and proceed with using either some existing funds or how we're going to kind of in a we want to do this in a smart way where we don't provide an undue burden onto our taxpayers, but we do have to get that track fixed so that this crop of students, you know, this year of students is the last cohort that's not able to use it. Absolutely.
Jim, would you mind sticking around for another segment?
Absolutely.
All right,
Please
we'll be right back.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Community TV, your neighborhood TV.
Publicly funded and a reliable partner for cable companies nationwide. It provides transparent coverage of local and state government, education, and public programming.
A digital town green that can be watched anywhere, anytime, and on any device.
Watch us on today's high-tech distribution methods.
Community TV in Connecticut.
Local,
unfiltered,
reliable, and yours.
Welcome back to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm your host, Pete Mezzetti, sitting here with Jim Tripp, who's running for first selectman of the town of Portland. Jim, welcome back, my friend. Good. Now, let's talk a little bit about, obviously, you're running for the first selectman spot in Portland. Who's running for the Board of Selectmen with you?
Very proud of the ticket that we have. We have a lot of experience. First of all, we have Ralph Zampano, who's our current deputy first selectman. He is running again to sit on the board. I have Laurel Steinhauser, who's the current member of our Board of Education, who is running. She's somebody who's been working very hard and contributing a lot in our community. April Graves is another woman who's thrown her hat in the ring, and she's running on our ticket. She's got a lot of background, has done a lot of work both in the social and justice realm and basically in the equity, as well as she's a co-founder of a group that actually makes sure that kids can afford to pay, go play sports and stuff. It provides scholarships and trust. It's called the Chatham Connection.
Really?
So, yes.
Oh, cool.
And then John Dillon, who's been a longtime Portland resident. His family's been in town for generations. But John also has years of experience both in administrative work for the state. He's, again, leader, manager of some large teams in the state. But he's also been in an elected capacity for years and years as well. So when I look at it, we talk about the fact we actually have, in our group, we have decades of experience in several, many different sectors in town.
Absolutely.
So very proud of the team that we've assembled. It's just a very broad, it's a broad coalition with some good perspectives that really can talk about a lot of diverse issues that go on in town.
One thing we got to mention.
Yes.
You and I have a mutual friend.
We do.
And that would be the Democratic town chairman of the town of Portland.
Yes.
Let's talk about him.
The Greek.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, Brian-
Absolutely.
Brian O'Connor. Nice to work with Brian. You know, former state representative.
Absolutely.
Just a wealth of knowledge and somebody that I know I always enjoy.
Oh, yeah.
Good friend, but
absolutely.
also a very, very smart individual when it comes to policy
Oh, yeah.
and the work that he does. So feel fortunate.
I've known Brian for 25-something years, and actually I worked with Brian's on his campaign when he was state representative down here, and we've still stayed in touch, and we still talk. And as a matter of fact, it was because of Brian and Susan Bransfield that you and I got hooked up and are doing the show together tonight.
Well, we'll see how it goes, and I'll know whether or not I thank him or. No, definitely.
Thanks, Jim.
Express the appreciation.
Thanks.
So.
No, it's a really Brian's a really good guy.
Yes.
Now let's ask you this: as far as obviously for the election, you have an opponent.
I do.
What makes you different than your opponent?
I'd say the difference is it has to do with leadership.
Okay.
I'd say leadership and experience. You know, my opponent is somebody I've worked with. You know, as I mentioned, I served a couple of years as president of the Portland Lions, and he's in the Lions with me.
Okay.
He's one of the officers. We get along, you know, fine on a personal level. You know, and he's a nice guy. I don't have, you know, no challenges, you know, no issues, you know, in terms of, like I said, we get along well, which makes it's an interesting dynamic as we're running against each other.
Absolutely.
But what I will say is that, to me, it comes down to its experience.
Right.
You know, when I look at the challenges that we're facing, you know, whether it's, again, water and having a plan to do that, whether it's analyzing what we need to do with our schools and being part of that solution, I've got like I said, over 20 years of volunteer experience in the town on a wide array of boards and commissions, and over 30 years of business experience. I've also raised a family in town. There are certain pressures and certain challenges that families face, you know, when they're paying taxes, when you know that I've lived that experience. So I think that all helps when you're trying to understand where people are coming from, and when you're trying to put together solutions that make sense for, you know, not only on paper, but also for how they're going to impact families. So I think also that level of experience, you know, I've managed large teams, so when I'm managing you know, basically, when you're the first selectman of Portland is the CEO of the town, you're effectively running a $36 million enterprise.
Correct.
I've managed large budgets, that number. The job I have now, I'm involved in negotiating contracts, you know, large contracts. I've managed large teams before of, you know, 30 people and, you know, plus. And I've managed both union and non-union folks. Okay. So I think that the big difference is how I would be able to use my experience and lead, and just the difference and just basically hit the ground running on day one. Right. You know.
Right. What's your campaign platform?
Primarily, my platform I've been focused on, to me, what I think right now is sort of the three top issues. We've talked about two of them already, but one of them, you know, I really am focused on what's going on with the cost of water in our community. That has a negative impact. You know, a lot of these issues, they overlap, right? When you're talking about economic development, you've also got to talk about the cost of water. You've got to talk about what you're doing with your sidewalks and walkability, right? They all interrelate to basically make the entire community stronger, right? So my focus from a platform has been we need to address the rising cost of water. We need to continue to drive, you know, economic development, redevelopment of the riverfront, and we need to focus and maintain education, because that is so critical not only to the kids that we raise in our community to be successful, but to the health of the community as well. So I think the only one we really haven't talked a lot about is water, though.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about it.
Let's talk a little bit about water.
Yeah, absolutely.
The bottom line is when it comes to what's happening with water and what we've been working on, this is something that when I got onto the Board of Selectmen in 2017, almost immediately, and I want to say it was early 2018, we reconstituted the Board of Selectmen Water and Sewer Subcommittee. Okay. I've been chairing that for the last 4 years. Oh, okay. And we've looked at and been analyzing this problem as we've been seeing it continue to evolve, seeing the rising water costs. What it amounts to is, to me, some very straightforward math. We generate 40% or so, plus or minus, of our water from our town well.
Okay.
That water costs us, by best estimates, between $50,000 and $100,000 a year to generate, right?
Sure.
The remaining 60% of our water comes from the MDC.
Yep.
In this year's budget, that cost was $857,000. 6 years ago, it was $467,000. We've watched our water costs go up from $550,000 a year
Right.
up to $950,000 a year. And what we're seeing is double-digit increases from MDC.
Absolutely.
Based on what the programs and the requirements that are being put on them, that's being passed along to us. We have a model that we work from as we're trying to look at rates and as we're trying to analyze these things. That model indicates that based on those increases, MDC rates to us will be somewhere, and could easily be between $1 and $1.1 million by the end of our contract in 2026. It's not sustainable for our community to do that. We need to find another solution. What we're doing now, and we have the support, Department of Public Health awarded us a $250,000 grant. We're working now with that grant to find our own Portland-owned water source.
Okay.
The reason is if we can make that other 60% of the water we need to generate, make that cost model look like the 40% that we're already generating through our well, we're going to save ourselves a lot of money as a community, and we're going to be able to control our own destiny. That water cost is very stable. The MDC water cost is not. So if we can control that, that's going to help us out tremendously.
Right.
You have to also look at the rest of the picture. It's not just the cost of water, but it's also the cost of the infrastructure we would have to build. So we've got to be smart about where we look, how we try to tap into an aquifer, where we can actually find good clean water in good clean water, good quantity, right, to meet our needs. But we've also got to look at how we're going to tie that back into the system and make sure we do that in a smart, economical way as well. The bottom line is that we've got to have this really in place by 2025. So when I'm talking with people, I tell them we basically have 4 years. In that 4 years, we've got to locate it, permit it, design the infrastructure, and implement it.
Absolutely.
Because when 2026 comes along, we want to be able to control our destiny when we're negotiating our future.
Absolutely. Now, what is the MDC, the Water Authority?
Metropolitan District.
Okay.
Yeah, which means that right now the water, the majority of water we get in town is basically coming from, Barkhamsted, Farmington River watershed, and we're moving it all the way, and we're sort of the end of the line for that.
Gotcha.
So we have to move that water a long way. It's not necessarily the most environmentally efficient, process. I think that if we are able to establish a solid water source along that in Portland, right, along east of the river, and we're able to meet our needs, which we should be able to do. And I'm very confident that we can do. But we can also then, as the next step from that, once we get our costs under control, then it makes a lot of sense to try to expanding the system. Right now, if we try to expand the system, we'd be asking folks to basically pay for a product that's more expensive than they'd want to pay for. Let's get the costs under control and get them stable, and then look where we expand the system in a way that's targeted to drive additional economic development. Right, and I also look at it and say 5 to 10 years. To me, I see this as the 0 to 5. I always like to think, I don't care whether it's education, whether it's economic development or water, I always like to look at the short-term plan and then the long-term plan. I'd also like us to then be thinking in a 5 to 10 year plan where we start trying to think about how we could work along that Route 66 corridor. Some of our neighbors have challenges with being able to get enough clean potable water. It's an opportunity for Portland, if we are controlling our destiny and we've got our house in order, to be able to start helping and servicing that customer, which again benefits all the Portland ratepayers by doing that, right, if done properly. And it also can benefit the economic stability of the entire Route 66 corridor.
Absolutely.
It can help out.
Absolutely. How big of a town is Portland?
We have 9,300 residents right now.
All right. Pretty good size.
So pretty good size. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we got a little bit more time left, but I'm going to ask the question that I always ask my candidates.
Sure.
It's election day.
Sure.
I am a constituent who hasn't voted yet.
Okay.
Why should I vote for you over your opponent?
If I've only got a very short while to say, I would say that for over 20 years, people in Portland have seen me work very hard for the town of Portland. Okay, and I do that work because I love doing that work. The volunteer work, everything I've done up until this point, it is because I love doing the work. To me, when you love doing something, you can do it well, and you can put all your energy and all your focus into it. If elected on first selectman, I will have put all my energy and all my focus. I will leverage that with my experience, and I will work very hard for, well, if you're there, or for you as a voter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got a little bit more time. We got about 45 seconds left, so I'll leave you, give you the floor for 45 seconds. What do you want to say to the constituents in the town of Portland?
I would say to the constituents in the town of Portland that I enjoy the support. I'm very much enjoying being out on the campaign. We're knocking on hundreds of doors. I'm loving the feedback that we're getting from the community, and I truly hope that I will have your support on November 2nd, and if elected on November 2nd, I will work very hard to, as we say in our videos, I will work hard every day to try to make life just that little bit better in Portland.
Jim Tripp, thanks for some time, my friend, and we'll see you soon.
We'll see you soon.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of Jim Tripp, I'm Pete Mezzetti. Thanks, good night, and we'll see you next time.